You about Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. What you're seeing on the screen right now is a still from the movie Yellow Submarine, which has a memorable and terrifying sequence set to Eleanor Rigby. The Beatles released Eleanor Rigby originally as the B side to the Yellow Submarine single. That is a pretty brutal come down in mood from side A to side B of that single. But Eleanor Rigby is a beautiful tune, and music theoretically and structurally, it's pretty interesting. Production wise, it's pretty interesting. So let's dig in. So Eleanor Rigby begins with a section that I think of as the chorus to the song. People disagree with me on this. I had a student analyze the structure for an assignment, and she thought that it started on the bridge. I disagree with that, but it is pretty ambiguous what you should call the sections of Eleanor Rigby. We will get to that. But anyway, here's how the song begins. Okay, so harmonically, this is pretty straightforward. We're in the key of E minor right now. And I've got the E natural minor scale loaded up on the accordion. The first chord in the tune is C. It's the sixth chord in E minor, meaning it's the chord that you get when you start on scale degree 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you go every other note. So there's your C, and then from there it goes to the one chord, E minor. Ah, look at all the lonely people. However, that is terrible voice leading. A better way to voice lead it would be to think of, all right, so here's E minor, and we're just going to take that fifth up a half step. Isn't that nice? So simple, but so tragic. All right, so after the chorus, what I call the chorus, we get into verse 1.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Lives in a dream.
All right, a couple of interesting things just happened. One of them is the length of this section of this little phrase is quite odd. It's 5 bars long, and that is not typical. In a pop song, phrases are almost always 4 or 8 bars long, sometimes 6 bars. 5 bars is pretty rare. And to add to the feeling of metrical confusion and instability, check out where this chord change happens right here.
Lives in a dream.
So far in the tune, all of the chord changes have happened on downbeats. So that's a downbeat,
Look at all the lonely people.
downbeat, downbeat,
Look at all the lonely people.
downbeat.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been.
Downbeat,
Lives in a
downbeat.
dream.
Oh, that one, all of a sudden, instead of falling on the downbeat, falls on beat 3, right in the middle of the bar. And your ear has been kind of taught by the song to expect chord changes to be on downbeats. So when you hear this chord change, you might naturally think, oh, it's a downbeat. And that further throws off your sense of like where in the meter and where in the phrase you are. So that's pretty cool. Harmonically, an interesting thing happens, which is the whole first 3 bars of this section are all on E minor, on an E minor chord.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where.
However, as I indicated up here, there's a change in the scale generating this feeling of E minor. So far the whole tune has been in E natural minor, but in that verse, Paul McCartney switches from E natural minor to E Dorian mode. And the two scales are a little bit different. So here's E Dorian mode. It's identical to E natural minor except for this 6th scale degree. So in E natural minor, it's C natural. In E Dorian, it's C sharp. And that's a subtle change, but it does change the mood quite a bit. So when Paul sings, Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice. This is all, could all just as easily be in E natural minor so far. In a da. Suddenly, ooh, C sharp. Suddenly it sounds like we're in the Renaissance. Yeah, Dorian mode is something that you think of it as being like a jazz thing, but in classical music, it's something that kind of predates the major minor system. It's something you think of more as belonging to like the Renaissance, like Greensleeves is in Dorian mode. Um, so I don't know if Paul is like intentionally evoking this kind of old timey, like very old timey classical music feeling, or if that's just what came out of him. But it's a really cool effect. And then when the chord changes to A minor over here, then we're back to E natural minor. So here's natural minor. A minor is the 4 chord, and it's got that C natural in it. If it was Dorian mode, it would be an A major with that C sharp in there. All right, so then the second half of the verse is the same as the first. And then
Waits at the window, wearing the face that she
there's the
keeps
Dorian
in
mode,
a jar by the door.
back to natural minor.
Who is it for?
Okay, now we get to another section of the song that is difficult to categorize. I choose to think of it as the pre-chorus. Now, typically the pre-chorus comes after the verse and before the chorus. Here, there is no chorus that follows it. It just goes straight into verse 2, but that's not totally unheard of in pop music and rock and things like that. And the next time the pre-chorus happens, it does lead into the chorus, so I justify that. However, my student who analyzed this thought that this purple section was the chorus, and that's not an unreasonable way to think about it either. I mean, ultimately, this song is just unconventional and hard to categorize using standard terms.
All the lonely people, where do they all come from?
So the first half of this phrase, it's got this E Dorian feeling because the bass line walks down from D to C sharp, and then it goes to C natural, and then to B. And that descending chromatic line, so it implies a shift from Dorian to natural minor, and also just descending chromaticism is always sad, which I assume is why Paul chose it. But when he gets to the C, the melody does something interesting.
Do they all come from? Do they all come from?
Do they all come from? There's a surprising note in there. It's, I mean, the underlying scale is kind of natural minor. But he doesn't exactly sing that. He kind of sings that, B flat. And that B flat is not part of the natural minor scale. It's really, he's really evoking the blues scale, the E blues scale. And that's an extremely cool thing to do because this song so far has kind of sounded like classical music, but they do not. They don't do that in classical music. That is very much an African American thing. Very cool stuff. So everything else in Eleanor Rigby pretty much repeats from there, but there's one more point of musical interest in this song, and that is the way it was recorded, the production of it, the sound of it. So forget for a second about the notes and the chords and the structure, and just think about the sound, specifically the sound of the strings, the double string quartet arranged by George Martin.
All the lonely people, where do they all come from? All the lonely people, where do they all belong? Now,
this probably doesn't sound all that remarkable or strange to you, but to listeners in the 1960s when this came out, this would have actually sounded quite strange because the conventional way that you record classical music is you're trying to recreate the feeling of being in the concert hall with the performers. So typically you'll set up the microphones at quite a distance from the performers. Like if they're on the stage of the concert hall, the microphones would be at the conductor position or out in the audience. And the goal is not to capture the direct sound of the instruments. The goal is to capture the sound bouncing off the walls and ceiling. the indirect sound, so that you get the natural reverb of the space. And even if you're recording in a studio, you very often set the mics at quite a distance from the ensemble to create that concert hall feeling, that indirect reflected sound feeling. In Eleanor Rigby, what Jeff Emmerich, the Beatles engineer, did was put the mics about like 1 inch away from the violins, violas, and cellos. And the players were like, dude, what are you doing? This is not the correct way to mic a violin. It's going to be really harsh and obnoxious and in your face. And Jeff Emmerich was like, yeah, I know. It's going to be awesome. So you don't feel like you're in a concert hall when you hear Eleanor Rigby. You feel like your head is about like a half an inch away from the bridge of the instrument, which is weird because you can have your head like right up next to a violin, but you can't have your head right up next to four violins, two violas, and two cellos. That's physically impossible. Now, we are all used to this sound of close mic'd instruments. Like it's become a standard studio technique, especially in rock. But it would have sounded very, very strange to people at the time. So there you go. It's a sound. It's a song that obviously evokes classical music, but also subtly subverts classical music by bringing in the blues scale and through this um, very kind of surreal and intense close miking. Eleanor Rigby. Thank you very much for watching.